Good afternoon. We have with us today Honorable Mark Mitchell, the Minister of Police, Minister of Corrections, Minister of Emergency Management. Minister, welcome to our office.
Thank you.
We have you as first time as the Minister of the Crown this time from 2023. Let's start with law and order, because as we say, the concept of safety and people feeling safer is the beginning of a good state of mind, which builds on to a better economy, performance, etc. From policing, as a police minister, what do you think has happened in the law and order situation?
Yeah, so, well, firstly, thank you, Kat, for inviting me and having me here. Secondly, we live in paradise. You only have to look out the window to see that. But law and order, I mean, fundamentally, we all want to live in a society where people feel safe in their home, people feel safe walking on the street,
right,
and people can go to their workplace and feel safe. And obviously, we've had some big challenges as a country in the last 5 or 6 years around that.
Yep.
So obviously, I've been focused very much on coming up with a strategy and working with police around. And by the way, police can't solve this problem on their own entirely,
Right.
and I'll come to that. But obviously around the violent retail crime,
Yep.
and the youth offending, we had to take serious positive actions to start to get on top of that problem. We've had, as you've seen recently, the boy races that come out, take over public roads, particularly in rural and provincial New Zealand,
Yep.
and cause sort of mayhem in those communities. And of course, we've had a prolific growth in gang numbers. We've got gangs now highly sophisticated, globally connected, carrying firearms, willing to use them, more violence. And fundamentally, all of those three groups, with a complete loss of respect for our frontline police officers, and no care or concern about the communities that they live in. So those are the things that we've had to tackle. Of course, as the incoming minister, I released my letter of expectation publicly.
You were the first.
Yeah, I was, to the Commissioner. I felt that was really important, Venkat, because I wanted the public to see and understand what we were doing. We made some commitments through the election period and prior to that,
Right.
when we were in opposition, and I wanted the public to see that we were serious about that and that we were going to follow through on it, which we are doing. Now, there's a lot more work to do, but we are seeing some promising signs in terms of the police have got a much more proactive, forward-leaning stance and approach to gangs. These gang convoys and these gang tangis are being policed properly. They have the resource. They're using, for example, the Eagle helicopter. And quite clearly my instruction was law-abiding Kiwis will have their rights protected over and above those of gang members or boy racers that think they're above the law. So we're seeing some good changes there. We've obviously got a very big program around public safety in terms of our legislation as well. Some of that legislation will come into act in November around the gang policies. So
That is this month.
That's this month. So the police are preparing for that. With the boy races, Simeon and I are working on legislation for that too, and Paul Goldsmith as well, to give the police some additional powers, some meaningful powers that they can get in and actually start seizing vehicles and start shutting these gatherings down. And of course, with our recidivist violent youth offenders, we're starting to see more of them now going into youth justice facilities with Oranga Tamariki. We've got legislation coming through that strengthens up sentencing around them, our serious youth offender legislation. We have started our youth military academies, which the first one has just finished the actual residential part. It's now back in the community. It seems to be going and working very well. Bearing in mind that these are the worst, these are the top 10%, the worst offenders that we have. But unfortunately, they're responsible for about 80% of the offending. And of course, a lot of our Indian business people and Indian community on the front lines and have been suffering the effects of that, over the last few years. Many of them are business people, own businesses, especially in retail, and have been impacted heavily. So we're starting to see some early signs of movement in the right direction there in terms of reduction in offending. However, we know that we've got a lot more work to do.
So you've been a police officer, so you know where the shoe pinches. Has there been a real reduction in retail crime in the last, say, 6 or 8 months? And if yes, to what level? What has been the percentage decrease?
So retail crime is a broad category. You can have
Even shoplifting is retail crime.
shoplifting, shrinkage, that type of stuff. And so with the raw and with the ability to be able to report that stuff a lot more easily, we're still seeing an increase in that shrinkage, shoplifting, what we'd term the more.
That is softer crime anyway.
Yeah, but the piece that I've been really focused on is the aggravated
violent
robbers, the ones that are coming in with hammers and are willing to put a hammer through a shopkeeper's head, and that's where the real focus has been. And yes, we're starting to see some promising signs in terms of a reduction in that type of offending. We've still, like I keep saying it because it's true, we've just coming up a year, 12 months into it. We've still got a lot more work to do.
So you put more police on the front line of the retail crime. Has the numbers increased now?
So we've got more police. What I've asked the police to do is be more visible, and they've made some very positive steps in that direction in terms of their visibility. But the one thing that was very obvious to me, and really I knew before I came into the role, is that it's got to be a whole of society response. So working very closely with business and retail associations, residents associations, CPNZ, Maori Wardens, Council, Oranga Tamariki, KO, MSD. Certainly there's been a lot of work right across all of those agencies and groups to sort of, our social service providers, in terms of coming up with an aligned strategy in terms of how we continue to make our business districts, CBDs, town centres safer.
So what's your expectation as the police minister with all these efforts going on, and you have been able to bring together so many organizations? Do you have a time factor by which you reasonably expect crime to come down?
Well, we've set some targets around the reduction of serious violent crime and also youth offending. So those are a couple of targets that we've set right throughout the whole criminal justice system. So the whole system has to respond and support each other to be able to achieve those, and that's a big part of the work that we're doing in government, is to break down the silos and get our criminal justice system working in a much more seamless manner, which it hasn't been. And that's why we've seen big backlogs of cases in the courts. We've obviously made a big investment into our correction system so that we know that we've got the capacity there to be able to meet the increase that we know is coming and has actually started under this government, because we've been very clear about the fact that we want the seriousness of the offending to be reflected in the consequences and the sentencing. Paul Goldsmith is doing work around the Sentencing Act, reducing or capping discounts and things like that to help with that. But yes, we have set targets. For me personally, of course, I just want to continue to see a trend of reducing, of the serious violent retail crime reducing, gang-related harm and violence reducing, boy races taking over rural and provincial towns reducing. So I'm looking, of course, to see that we're actually getting all those figures moving in the right direction.
On the issue of capping discounts, Minister, what has been the international experience, especially in some of the countries where violence is seen more like the United States of America, Canada? Has there been a real reduction in crime because of capping of discounts?
I haven't seen any evidence on that. Paul Goldsmith would be better to speak to that. It's inside his portfolio. But I think that the one thing I would say, I've just recently come back from Australia. I was there for 2 days, and the Queensland elections had just happened, and they had a change of government, and a Liberal National government was coming in, and which is not that common in Queensland.
Right.
But of course, as the incoming Premier had to deal with issues around numbers, not having the numbers in the police, difficult to recruit. They've blown their budget by 200 million. They're having to make cuts immediately, and they're dealing with one of the big issues of the day throughout the campaign was the massive increase in youth crime. So we're not on our own in terms of some of the issues that we have to face
No, certainly
and
not.
deal with it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an international trend, but I think that we also have a huge advantage that other countries don't have. We're an island nation. We don't have borders to worry about. We have a national system, so we don't have a federal state type system.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's lots of reasons why we should be able to get ourselves back out ahead of the rest of the world in terms of being one of the safest countries in the world.
You still believe that New Zealand is one of the safest countries in the world?
Well, I mean, yes, I do. I think that we'd probably have to. You probably have more information than I do on that, Venkat. But you know, fundamentally, we are still quite a safe country, but we're not as safe as we should be.
Well, I think, as we said in the beginning, it's the perception that matters more
Yeah.
than reality.
Yeah.
Lastly, on the policing matter, how well is the plan to equip the police with more resources, human resources, material resources? Those are all your responsibilities as a minister. How is that going? Is it going according to plan?
Well, we have to get our books back in order. It was not sustainable. The fiscal track that we were
Yeah.
on was not sustainable for us as a country, and it was going to do awful economic and social damage to us had we carried on that track. A big part of what we're doing had to do as the incoming government is go through a cost savings exercise, which, by the way, we have to maintain that discipline throughout the course of this government. It wasn't just 1 year. But for me in the police portfolio, it was quite simply a matter of pushing any cost savings that we found back out onto the front line in new investment, and that's exactly what we did. We want to make sure that we're delivering better public services for the people of New Zealand who expect to have a world-class police service that can they deliver the services they want, and to do that, we just have to keep pushing resource out onto that front line.
Of course, you have the advantage of having been an operational policeman. So you know exactly what is lacking and what is required to be done.
Yeah.
Coming to the corrections part of your portfolios, Minister, what is the inadequacy there? Because that's an area where there's a lot of debate going on still about the 3 strikes and the sentencing itself, the general feeling that New Zealand is a softer country.
Firstly, my observation would be is that we have an absolute world-class corrections service with incredible people right through the whole organisation, from the leadership through to our corrections facilities, through to our people out there doing community-based sentences, looking after people that are being monitored. So we've got, without a doubt, we've got a world-class service. The three focus points for me as the incoming minister were staff safety. Corrections officers are actually safe. We all deserve to get out of bed in the morning and go to our workplace and feel that we can be safe. And that includes our corrections officers who work in an extremely difficult and challenging environment with the worst, most violent people that we have in our society. And the next one was recruiting, is that because they've been down on numbers for a long time. And the good news is they put together a new recruiting and marketing program, which has been out there. We've had a massive response to that. Well over 20,000 people have expressed interest in becoming a corrections officer. We're now recruiting and deploying about 140 officers a month. And it means for the first time that we're about 350 to 400 above the rate of attrition, which has positive spin-offs because you can allow prisoners out of their cells for longer, you can deliver more rehabilitation and programs. The third thing was obviously around capacity, and we've made a very big investment into capacity, prison capacity, focused primarily in Waikeria, with additional 1,800 beds coming online. And of course, and the other big thing that we've focused and invested into is rehabilitation. Is we put about $70 million in place to deliver more rehabilitation and to deliver for the first time, and I just passed the legislation a few weeks ago, the first time being able to deliver rehabilitation programs to prisoners on remand.
So throw the key away is not a solution.
Well, it's a solution in terms, if you're talking about public safety, then and you've got violent people that are hurting and creating victims, the safest place for them is actually inside prison. So there's a big economic and human cost to having people in the community that should be in jail.
So you're not averse to the prison population increasing.
No, not at all. No, we're going to have to do that because we are prioritising public safety.
So which means that even in the correction space, there will be tougher laws coming.
Well, there'll be more capacity for our.
Are you building more prisons?
Yes, yeah. Well, at the moment we're expanding Waikeria, so we're doing a big expansion in Waikeria. I think there's 600 beds that'll come online in June next year, and there's about 800. There's about 810.
But does it negate your concept of rehabilitation if you're increasing the prison population?
Well, we will continue to try and rehabilitate prisoners, and one of the things that I've sort of been really clear about is let's make sure that we're delivering programs that give them actual real life skills, things that will genuinely help them and support them when they reintegrate and come back into society to make good decisions and not come back into the prison system again.
Minister, before I get to the emergency management part of it, how are you dealing with the gangs? Because they are seen as more menaceful, more of a menace now, especially in the drugs area. How are you dealing with it as the minister?
Yeah, I mean, the gangs are obviously the biggest driving force behind any sort of contraband and the drugs and, the misery that we see peddled through our communities. So we've just been very clear that we've got, as a government, as a coalition government, we just have zero tolerance for them. And we want to make his life, for a gang member, as life as hard and tough as it can be in our country. And that is why you're seeing a big focus by the police and being very proactive and taking action against the gangs. And you're just going to see that continue.
Drugs are a major problem, isn't it, as far as the gangs are concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the ones behind that. And unfortunately, with the advent of these 501s being deported from Australia to
How
New
many
Zealand,
have come in since 2014 when it was?
Oh, there's thousands of them have come into the country, but I couldn't give you the exact number, Venkat. But they have been they've been a wrecking ball for us because they've sort of brought some of those more violent gangs from Australia in here, big global networks, and it's definitely made the whole gang scene in New Zealand a lot more dangerous and menacing, without a doubt.
Right, I wish you all the best on that call. Tell us about emergency management, Minister. That's been in recent months occupying a lot of your time.
Yeah, it does. And look, I wasn't expecting to get that. I'd asked the Prime Minister for police and corrections because I felt very strongly that these were two agencies that have a critical role to play.
Safety, yeah.
Public safety, absolutely. So, but look, I've loved having the emergency management portfolio. I'm an Auckland-based MP. My electorate was hit very hard with the Auckland flooding. And I learned a very hard lesson there in terms of we were waiting for the cavalry to come over the hill and it never arrived. And it was because, we've got big problems inside our emergency management sort of ecosystem. So, to become the minister, it's given me the opportunity we're doing a complete rewrite of our legislation to make sure that gives us a really solid platform to operate from, remove a lot of the confusion that exists inside the system at the moment, recognise everyone who has a role to play in emergency management, and that's obviously from our first responders, from central government, local government, regional government, rural trusts, iwi, hapu, community groups. It's everyone is going to understand exactly where they fit, what their role is, where they can expect to get information from, and it'll help us have a really cohesive system that will help us deal with our emergencies. Because since I've been minister, I've had 6 local states of emergency.
Yes.
We've had fires, we've had flooding, we've had earthquakes, we've had space weather, which I knew nothing about until I became the minister.
Yeah.
But it's something that's very real and we have to manage. So there's an enormous amount of work going on. I love the emergency management portfolio in the sense that I get to work with extraordinary people right throughout the whole system that are outstanding in their jobs individually, But as Sir Jerry Matapara's report back to me after Cyclone Gabriel highlighted that the system didn't support them. And,
I think Gabriel was a wake-up call for all of us.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've had report after report after report. So what we're doing now is we're just working on a plan. We're doing a lot of work inside government in terms of how do we manage our risk as a country. We're working on the legislation, and we're going to set ourselves up, make sure that we're in the best possible position we can be to manage our own risk and deal with the emergencies when they come along.
Yeah, this is the only part of your portfolios where you're up against nature.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't control.
Yeah, no,
You
that's
just can't
absolutely.
control. You don't even know when it's coming.
No, correct. Yeah.
So people are all they're getting worried when end of January comes, because for 2 years we've had terrible flooding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, Minister, give us a concluding statement of your role in these 3 areas, and also tell us finally about, we are not entirely convinced about the ministerial group that you have established. No, it's not, you have not established, of the retail crime. Because if crime is coming down, why do you need an advisory group? And you're more than capable, your capacity as the minister is well tested. Do we need a group like that?
So I support the group entirely. I think that when you look at the composition of it, it is people that are actually, you know, in the industries that we need to work closely with.
Yeah.
And I think that although we have sort of informal engagement and we might be invited to an AGM, this is a way of formalising that engagement and allowing them to actually bring forward options and policy that will help us I guess it talks, Venkat, to what I was saying before, is that the police on their own can't solve every issue.
Right.
But we can solve issues when we come together as a group and we get aligned. And I guess having that committee is a way of us formalising that engagement as well. Especially for Paul, who's got sort of an overarching umbrella
right.
across the justice sector and does a lot of the heavy lifting with legislation. Look, for me, I'm just really optimistic about where we're going. I love serving as a minister in this cabinet. I was in the previous cabinet as well, and I love serving under Chris Luxon. He is someone that is just driven by results. And it's very easy to be a minister under a prime minister that is holding people accountable, holding his ministers accountable, and driving for results. And us testing ourselves. As you can see, we have a quarterly plan.
Yep.
So there's no drift. There's sharp focus, and we know that we just have to keep delivering.
And it's working.
I think it is working. I think it's working very well. So you know, but we know that there's still mountains to climb. We know that there's still a lot of work to do. But everyone is focused on that and just getting on with their job.
So the way you're going now, you have reason to believe that New Zealand will become even safer in the next couple of years.
Well, that's a good part of, I was reflecting on this the other day, is that I suddenly realised that a good part of my adult life has been dedicated to public safety.
Right.
We all love our country.
Yeah.
We're all proud of it. And we want visitors that come here to feel like they're coming to the safest country in the world. And we want all of us to be able to get up in the morning and feel like we're living in the safest country in the world. And so that's my motivation, and that's what drives me. And it's a huge privilege and honour to have the role that I have. It's a moment in time, and I'm determined to make a change.
I think you've brought a lot of mana into your post, and the public perception of safety is changing. And you're seen as someone who keeps up the promise. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Venkat.
As you know, we are here to support what you do, all because we want New Zealand to remain the safest place on earth. On that, thank you very much, Minister, for your time.
Thank you, Venkat. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.